Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Daisy. For today's video, I'll be reading my subscribers' spooky stories. So grab your snacks, grab your cobija, and let's get straight into it. Good evening, Daisy. I want to share with you an encounter I experienced while working at an emergency shelter for children. Technically, these places are no longer called orphanages, but rather emergency shelters, group homes, or residential programs. Either way, the place I worked at was the only shelter in my county and has continued to house children for the past 100 years. For context, the shelter was originally located in my city's downtown area, but was rebuilt in the 1980s at its current location. Many people who worked there, or even just visited, would tell stories of hearing little kids laughing and running on the second floor when no children were present. At the new location, there's an eerie photo in the lobby showing the first group of children who stayed at the shelter. The picture is from the early 1900s, and it definitely looks that way. Now, on to my story. At the time, I was considered extra help, which meant I was scheduled to work any shift that needed additional staff. For a while, I was working graveyard shifts, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which is when a lot of the scary things happened. One particular night, I was working alone in the unit, which was the main area where the children sleep until they are placed in a home. My supervisor was in front of the building, watching the security cameras. That area is located far down the hallway outside of the unit. To give you a sense of the space, the unit is about half the size of a basketball court. There are two sides, one for the girls and one for the boys, with about 6 rooms on each side. At the far end is a community closet where the kids can pick their outfits for the day. That closet has a large window separating the clothes, one side for younger kids and the other for older ones. The unit also has big windows along one wall that look out onto a courtyard. And there's a small round window about 10 feet high on the opposite wall. That window is unreachable without a ladder. It was around 2:30 a.m. All the kids were asleep, and I was quietly working on my paperwork. I didn't even have music or a show playing on my phone like I usually do to stay awake. It was completely silent. Suddenly, I heard 3 loud bangs on the small round window. I jumped. Less than a second later, I heard 3 more bangs, this time coming from the community closet window. I snapped my head in that direction. Then, a third set of bangs came, just as loud as the others, on the courtyard windows directly behind me. I turned around, expecting to see teenagers messing around outside, but there was no one there. It happened again. I stayed in my seat, frozen. And it started in the same pattern. 3 bangs on the round window, followed by 3 bangs on the closet window, then 3 more on the courtyard window. Each time, I turned my head in the direction of the noise. I even saw the courtyard window shaking. That's how hard the hits were. I immediately picked up the unit's landline and called my supervisor. I said, "Please check the cameras. Please tell me there's someone out there. Someone is banging on the windows. I can't see anyone. Please check and call security." I was on the verge of tears. My supervisor stayed calm and said, "Okay, I'm checking right now. Just hold on." I waited, hoping she'd find someone on the camera. A prank, anything that made sense. Then she said, "Are you sure? I don't see anyone at all. There is no activity on the cameras, but I'll ask the security to do a perimeter check." Right as she was about to end the call, it happened again. But this time, the bangs came from all 3 windows at once. I screamed. My supervisor, still on the phone, gasped and said, "Oh my gosh, it's happening right behind me, on the window, in my office." Technically, I wasn't supposed to leave the unit since I was the only staff member on the floor, but I had never been more terrified in my life. I ran out of the unit straight to my supervisor's office. She stayed with me for the rest of the shift. We never found out what caused those bangs, But that wasn't the first or the last paranormal thing that happened there. It was just the most terrifying experience I can remember. My name's Sarah. My family and I have gone through a lot of creepy, unexplainable stuff, but these are my top 2 paranormal experiences that I still can't get over. This happened when I was 13. My little brother's room was at the end of the hallway, and mine was up front. We were all used to hearing strange things coming from his room, mainly his toys going off by themselves. But since he had so many, and some were old and glitchy, we just assumed it was nothing. Broken noise boxes, maybe toys shifting on their own. But one day, something happened that we just couldn't explain. I was relaxing in the living room, and my mom was in the kitchen cleaning. My dad and little brother were outside playing, so it was just me and her in the house. A few of my brother's toys were scattered on the floor nearby. Out of nowhere, one of his toy cars, the remote-controlled kind, started moving by itself. I looked at it, then at my mom. She looked back at me. We both froze. Then the toy car suddenly sped up. It started zooming across the floor all on its own. That's when my mom freaked out. "This is God's house. You don't belong here." Then she started rebuking it, saying, "In Jesus' name, I command you to leave." Every time she spoke, the car would pause, like it was listening. The second she stopped, it would start moving again. She kept going until finally, the car stopped completely. I looked around, thinking maybe my dad or brother had snuck inside to mess with us, but no one was there. That's when I noticed something. The remote for the toy car was sitting right by the TV stand, directly in front of me. I picked it up. No batteries. I checked the bottom of the toy car. No batteries, no wires, nothing. Just an empty shell of a toy that should not have been able to move. To this day, I still don't know what that was, but my mom and I both saw it happen. That wasn't the only experience that stuck with me though. Another encounter happened just last year. I always dealt with sleep paralysis. It's scary, yeah, but I got so used to it that I learned how to snap out of it. Pray, stay calm, wiggle a finger. One night, I was lying flat on my bed, facing the ceiling, which people online say can trigger sleep paralysis. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I woke up in the middle of the night, and the first thing I felt was the burning sensation on my wrist, like something was gripping it tightly. When I opened my eyes, I saw something standing next to me. Not a shadow, definitely not a dream. It looked like a figure made out of smoke or gas, but its eyes were pitch black. It just stared at me, and all of a sudden, it opened its mouth wide, way too wide, like it was shocked that I could see it, like it realized it had been caught. It quickly let go of my wrist and flew out of my room. Just like that. Gone. Here's the craziest part. I could move. I wasn't frozen like usual. I sat up, grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed at my wrist. What I saw made my heart drop. There was a red mark wrapped around my wrist, like a handprint, but the fingers were way too big to be mine. They were thick, like a grown man's hand had grabbed me. I jumped out of bed and ran to the door, trying to see where the thing had gone, but it was already gone. I ran to my parents' room, and as I got closer, I noticed the red handprint was starting to fade with each step, but the burning pain was still there. I shook my mom awake, panicking. Something grabbed me. My wrist is burning. She jumped up, looked at my wrist, and even though the mark was almost gone, she saw enough to know I wasn't making it up. We rushed to the living room, and I put ice on my wrist, trying to calm down, while my dad searched the house for intruders. I sat with my mom and told her everything. The smoky figure, the black eyes, the burning grip. She didn't even question it, because in my family, we've been through a lot of paranormal stuff. All we could do that night was pray, and we stayed up together, just in case it decided to come back. Hi Daisy, my name is Adrian, and I come from a small town in South Texas called Paralysis. It's a quiet place, the kind of town where everyone knows each other, and stories, especially ghost stories, are passed down like heirlooms. But my story isn't something I heard from someone else. It's something I lived. Ever since I was a kid, I believed in the paranormal. Not just in a curious or skeptical way. I knew it was real. I could see things that others didn't. Black shadows always watching. They'd follow me, peeking from behind corners or slipping through barely open doors. I could feel them too, their presence heavy like wet air. I tried telling my mom, but she always brushed it off. "It's just your imagination, mijo," she would say. "Your mind's playing tricks on you." But it never felt like a trick. It felt real. Too real. One night, everything changed. I was about 10 or 11, curled up in bed, watching a movie on my old TV. The room was dark, except for the bluish glow from the screen. Outside, the wind was calm. Everything was still. Then out of nowhere, something darted across my window. Fast, like a blur, but I clearly saw it. A creature with horns and red glowing eyes. Its skin was pale, almost sickly, and hairless. It didn't walk like a person. It moved like it didn't belong in this world. I wanted to scream, to run, to call out for my mom, but I couldn't. I was frozen, glued to my bed like something invisible had pinned me there. My chest tightened, my shoulders ached with pressure, and my whole body felt like it was buried under a weight I couldn't see. The room felt colder than before. I reached for the remote with trembling hands and shut off the TV. The room went completely dark. I yanked the covers over my head, like they could protect me from whatever was out there. I tried to pray, to say something, anything. But before I could even speak, I heard 6 slow knocks on my window. I stopped breathing. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode. I started praying hard. Words stumbled out of me. As I neared the end of the prayer, I heard a sharp, cracking sound. My window cracked. I don't know what part of me kept going, but I prayed even harder as I trembled with fear. And then, somehow, I fell asleep. It didn't make sense. It felt like something had put me to sleep, like it drained all my fear out of me and left me feeling empty. The next morning, I woke up with my heart still racing. I never told anyone. Not for years. But eventually, the truth came out. I was talking with my mom one day, long after we had moved out of the house. We were reminiscing, and the conversation drifted toward strange things. Dreams, gut feelings, memories we couldn't explain. That's when I told her about that night. The creature, the knocks, the cracked window. She went quiet. Then, after a long pause, she let out a sigh and something I'll never forget. That house was built on top of a cemetery. I didn't tell you back then because I didn't want to scare you. I didn't want you overthinking everything. But I had already known. Somehow, deep inside, I knew. Long before she ever said a word. The shadows, the feelings, the things I saw, they weren't in my imagination. They were part of something much older, something that never left. and maybe something that never can. Hi Daisy, my name's Javier. I live in Houston, Texas, but I also visit Mexico during the holidays. I don't know what it is, but there has always been something creepy about my parents' room, whether it's the one in Mexico or the one here in the US. It just always gave off this strange negative vibe. My dad used to tell my mom about weird things he experienced in their room. He would see the shadow of a woman walking around, or even creepier, he said sometimes the shadow would try to pull my mom away in her sleep. He'd have to scream at it to make it stop. My father sadly passed away 2 years ago, and one night we were talking about paranormal things as a family. I hesitated but ended up bringing up my concern that whatever tormented my dad might now go after one of us. Everyone looked at me like I had no idea what I was talking about. Some time passed, and I ended up having to sleep in that room. My dad's old room with my mom. She would usually get up around 4 a.m. to take care of my baby nephew when my sister left for work. A few strange things happened during that time, but one experience marked me the most. At the time, my brother's truck had broken down, so he would borrow my car. I eventually got tired of asking for rides. I needed my car for school and didn't like riding the bus, so we made a deal. I would wake up at 3 a.m. when my brother left for work, ride with him to his friend's house about 30 minutes away, and drive back home. That morning, everything went according to plan, and I got home around 4:30 a.m. I went to my parents' room and laid down, but no matter what I did, I couldn't fall asleep. I turned and faced the wall, closed my eyes, and finally started drifting off until something woke me up. It felt like something was staring at me. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I figured it was just a bad case of sleep paralysis. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a strange, blurry, dark figure peeking at me from the top corner of the room. I panicked. I kept trying to move. Eventually, I managed to break free and sit up. I looked around the room, but there was nothing. When suddenly, a fog-like shadow walked into the room. It kept moving until it reached the restroom door. Then it stopped, turned to look at me, and when we made eye contact, it ran out of the room. As soon as it did it, my LED lights shut off and the room went pitch black. When I tell you I almost stayed in my pants, I am not exaggerating. I was terrified. I jumped out of bed and bolted towards the kitchen, which is right next to my parents' room. As I got closer to the room where my mom was sleeping, I woke up, back in the same position I had fallen asleep. And once again, I couldn't move. For some reason, my eyes were darting in all directions, like they were trying to make my body move. After what felt like forever, I finally snapped out of it. I didn't even try to go back to sleep. I stayed up the rest of the morning. I've experienced sleep paralysis before, but never like that. Now that I have had time to reflect, I realized that the shadow I saw looked strangely similar to the ones my dad used to talk about. The only difference is, the one I saw looked like a man, and eerily similar to my brother's silhouette. I don't think it was actually my brother. I'm pretty close to him, and I know he'd never try to scare or hurt me. But I can't help but wonder, was it the same entity that tormented my dad? Something connected to my brother? Or something even more sinister? Something that didn't have good intentions? Hello, Daisy. My name is Veronica. This story I'm about to share is something that happened to my dad when he was a kid. He and his parents had a terrifying encounter with La Lechuza. Growing up, my dad would tell us about the legend of La Lechuza, and honestly, I never believed it. That is, until he shared this story. One night, he and his family were on their way home. His parents were in a bad mood, arguing the whole ride back. When they got home, the fighting continued. Then, suddenly, they heard a loud bang on the roof. Out of nowhere, there was laughing, but not an ordinary laugh. It was high-pitched and chilling, like a witch. My dad looked out the window, and that's when he saw her, a creature that was half woman, half bird, sitting right on the roof. She just laughed and laughed and laughed all night long. My dad and his family were frozen in fear. They realized she was feeding off the anger, the chaos, and especially the fear. That's when my dad's mom grabbed her rosary and started praying. She prayed and prayed all night, not stopping for a second. Finally, by the time morning came, the laughter stopped and she was gone. To this day, it still scares my dad, and now it scares us too. I never thought legends could be real until my dad came face to face with one. I live with my parents and 2 younger siblings in my parents' apartment. I usually take care of my younger siblings while my parents work late into the night. This particular story took place on one of those nights. I was in my room while my siblings played in the room next door. The front door was locked, and since our apartment is small, you can hear everything clearly. While I was on my phone, I suddenly heard the lock turn and the front door open. As usual, I called out for both my mom and dad, but neither of them answered. Still, I didn't think much of it at the time. About 5 minutes later, I heard the front door open again, and this time I heard my mom come in. She sat down in the living room and casually asked if my dad was in the shower. I told her I wasn't sure, but I'd go check. I walked into their bedroom, which was completely dark since it was already late. As I stepped in, I heard the shower running. The bathroom light was on, and I could clearly hear someone inside showering. So I walked back out and told my mom, "Yeah, he's in there." Not long after, she headed into the room to grab something and started talking to my dad, assuming he was in the shower. But he didn't respond. She just figured he didn't hear her and walked out. We continued talking in the living room for a bit until we heard the front door open. We both looked toward it, and it was my dad walking in. My mom and I just stared at each other, completely confused. I rushed back to the bedroom. This time, it was pitch dark. No shower running, no bathroom light, nothing. Just silence and darkness. Another time, I was in my parents' room watching a show with my dad. Their bed is positioned in a way that lets you see the living room and the kitchen entrance all at once. We were watching TV when I suddenly got a weird feeling, like something told me to look toward the kitchen. The second I turned my head, I saw a jet black, dog-like figure sprint into the kitchen, so fast it almost didn't seem physically possible. I immediately turned to my dad, and he was already looking in the same direction, eyes wide, in shock. Our only dog was in the bathroom, asleep. My mom, my dad, and I have seen strange figures and heard each other's voices calling from empty rooms. Strangely enough, my younger siblings seem completely unaffected. So that was it for today's spooky stories. A big thank you to everyone that sent in a spooky story. I know I say this all the time, but you guys live busy lives, and for you to send a story out of your busy schedule, I really do appreciate it. Los quiero. Now, if you have a story that you like to share, please send it in at my Gmail. daicyspooks@gmail.com. The info will be in the description box just in case you want to send in yours. But that is all, guys. Los quiero mucho. I hope to see you guys all in my next one. Bye.